Chapter 6. The Witch's Daughter. Queen Snow White woke in terror. It was the same old nightmare. She was running through a tangled forest with grasping trees scratching her as she fought to escape their clutches. She almost expected to be covered in cuts, but found herself unharmed. "Mama?" Snow looked for her mother's reflection in the mirror on her bedside table. "Are you there?" But the old queen didn't answer. Snow looked around her room at the other reflective surfaces. She found nothing other than her own pale face. It was a strange feeling, waking up without her mother smiling back at her from one of the mirrors. Snow glanced around her room, at her things, trying to shake off the terrible feeling of her dream. Everything was in its place. There was nothing strange or amiss as there normally would be when she thought she'd woken from a nightmare, but was actually still dreaming. This was her room, with its deep red tapestries adorned with golden trays and tiny black birds hanging on the walls. This was her bed, with its light petal pink curtains draped around the 4 cherry oak pillars. She looked around her room again, at the many mirrors held in beautiful antique gold frames of various sizes. Yes, everything was as it should be. She was safe. That was what her mother always said to her when she woke up startled, wasn't it? "Look, you're in your own room. You're safe, my bird." But the shadows of this nightmare remained. She could still feel the looming danger of something pursuing her as she searched the dark corners of her room, hoping she still wasn't still dreaming. "I need to speak with my mother." Snow had to tell her about the other part of her dream. It was a new nightmare, one that reminded her of a story her mother had told her when she was very small. The story of the dragon witch who put a young girl to sleep. Why do witches always put young girls to sleep in these stories? Snow White's own story was very similar. Her mother had put her to sleep, but that was many years past, so long ago that Snow barely thought of it. The dragon witch had been plaguing Snow's dreams for many nights. That much she knew, but the actual events of the bad dream always escaped her upon waking. All she remembered was the forest from her childhood. She'd been trying to capture her memory of the dragon witch dream so she could share it with her mother, but it was like a forgotten word or a name she couldn't grasp. Snow knew this dream was important. She knew this nightmare held meaning, and now that she finally remembered it, her mother wasn't there. Where is she? Snow White dressed quickly in one of her favorite gowns. It was a red velvet dress decorated with embroidered silver birds and shiny black beads that sparkled in the light. She sat at her vanity, looking at her mirror. She brushed her thick black hair, brilliantly streaked with silver at each of her temples. She watched the curls bounce back with each stroke before tying the red ribbon to keep her hair from falling into her round pale face and large eyes. Snow never thought much about how she looked, and that day wasn't any different, but she thought it was sweet. The king always said she hadn't changed over the years, though she had to admit she did have a few more lines around her eyes and mouth when she smiled, which was most of the time. Snow was so accustomed to seeing her mother's face in her mirror that it was strange to see her own. She hadn't realized how much she took her mother's company for granted, how lonely she would feel without her, especially now that her children were grown and living in their own kingdoms and her beloved was away on a diplomatic mission. "You look beautiful, my bird. You always do." Snow White looked up with a gleaming smile at the reflection of her mother in the mirror. "Mama, where were you? I have to tell you about my dream." "I know your dreams, my darling. I've been trying to find the dark fairy. I have to warn her," the old Queen Grimald replied. "Is she the dragon witch?" Snow White asked. Grimald laughed. "Yes, my bird, the very one." "Is your old story coming true then?" Snow asked, confused. "I don't understand." "I'm not sure I do either, darling. The story I told you so many years ago was in a book your cousins gave to me. I think they may have written it, and I'd very much like to see it now. Do you have it somewhere among your things by chance?" Snow White knew exactly where it was. It was in a place she didn't like going. "It's not in my chambers. It's in one of the trunks in the attic, packed away with the rest of your possessions. Are you brave enough to go up there alone, my bird? It's very important that you do." Chapter 7. The Fairy Academy. One morning, Maleficent was messily munching on a blueberry scone while tossing crumbs to her favorite crow, Opal. It had been more than a year since Nanny had found the tiny Maleficent and taken her into her home. She had given the girl time to become comfortable in her new surroundings before bringing up school. And now, Nanny decided it was time to broach the subject. "It's time to think about your education, my darling. You must learn your fairy magic." "I'm not a fairy," Maleficent protested. "Of course you are, my dear. What in the fairylands gave you the idea that you aren't a fairy?" Nanny asked. "I don't know." "Right, you don't know, and that's exactly my point. There are many things you don't know, and the only way you will learn them is by going to school." But nothing," Nanny said firmly. Don't worry about those flighty featherhead fairies. If they say or do one thing that makes you sad, you tell me. That goes for your instructors as well. And I will be there, my dear, every hour of every single day. I'll be at your disposal without fail." "Will you?" Maleficent asked. "Yes, my dears. I am the headmistress after all." So Maleficent's education began. It started out slowly and wasn't quite what Maleficent expected. She learned the properties of magical plants and how to brew potions, and she easily mastered enchanting inanimate objects to do mundane tasks. But Maleficent could tell that her teachers didn't like her, even though she was brighter and more advanced than any of the other students. They didn't show her the affection or care they showed the other students. That didn't bother Maleficent, except that she often found herself without much to do. During flying lessons, while other fairies learned how to use their wings properly, she sat by herself and read books she had found tucked away on Nanny's bookshelves. Nanny had thought the books were hidden where Maleficent couldn't find them. They contained the sort of magic Maleficent had expected to learn in fairy classes. So, guided by her books, Maleficent began to practice her own magic. Maleficent quickly realized that she could teach herself almost anything she wanted to by reading a book. There wasn't a subject that didn't fascinate her. She coveted her time alone after school in her treehouse, where she could read, and she'd often share her findings with her crows. Maleficent had decorated her treehouse with the various things her crows and ravens brought to her. She found it interesting that some crows were drawn to particular items. Opal had a fondness for brightly colored pieces of sea glass, shiny buttons, and beautiful beads like those found on a fancy ball gown. While some of Maleficent's birds brought her herbs for her spells, others brought colorful feathers, random teacups, brass bells, and anything else that struck their fancy. She loved spending time with her crows and taught them everything she learned on the subjects of bird lore and magic. She started to teach them how to open their minds so she could see through their eyes when they traveled, and how to communicate with other creatures to learn about their lands. Maleficent hadn't known that so many other lands existed until her crows told her stories of the different realms that stretched in every direction into what seemed like a never-ending eternity. She felt lucky to have her pets, especially in light of how little in common she had with her schoolmates. The other fairies were incessantly buzzing around each other, complimenting one another for the silliest of things. "Merryweather, your wings look lovely today," was something Maleficent heard far too often in the classroom while she was trying to brew nightshade into her cauldron. The other fairies in Maleficent's class seemed to defer to Merryweather. In Maleficent's opinion, Merryweather was a rather unremarkable fairy and was far too bossy. Nevertheless, she seemed to be the favorite of all the instructors, which made her all the more impossible to deal with. Despite her penchant for bullying and her inflated sense of self, Merryweather was a good student. She spent her breaks in the courtyard studying and tutoring other students. Maleficent thought she and the fairy could be friends if Merryweather didn't dislike her so much. There wasn't a day that went by when Maleficent wasn't teased or looked down on by her classmates. If she was trying to study or work at a spell, her classmates would mock her for having to walk from her cauldron to the pantry and back instead of flying. They'd whisper nasty things as they fluttered by like wingless freak or ogre horns. One afternoon in class, Fauna, one of Merryweather's best friends, raised her hand to ask a question. Fauna was a sweet-faced fairy dressed in green. She seemed too nervous to ask Miss Petal the question when she called on her, but Merryweather nudged her on. Miss Petal, wouldn't it be more, pleasant if Maleficent wore something to cover her disgusting ogre horns in class? Fauna said in a small voice. Maleficent looked up from her bubbling cauldron to see what the teacher would say. The teacher grew scarlet under Maleficent's steely gaze. I dare say it would be more pleasant and less, distracting. Perhaps I will say something to her guardian. All the students were giggling at Miss Petal's reply when the class was interrupted by the unexpected arrival of the headmistress, who shot the teacher and students a scathing look. I dare say Maleficent would find it more pleasing if you all had your wings snipped. She wouldn't have you buzzing around her head while she was trying to work her spell, that's for certain. But you don't see her vocalizing her everyday dream, do you? Maleficent grew white with embarrassment, a striking difference from her usual gray complexion. I didn't, she stammered. And who can blame you if you did? Nanny looked at the students as she continued. You're a shameful bunch, the lot of you. Disgusting horns, indeed. Did you ever stop to think that there are creatures in this world who might find wings disgusting? Have you not yet realized that the sun doesn't rise and set by fairy standards? There are other creatures in this world, dear ones. Beautiful, lovely, and powerful creatures that don't look like me or you. You'd do well to remember that, Fauna. All of you would. The fairies didn't pay much attention to the one of legends when she went on about such things. She didn't make sense. Everyone knew fairy wings were beautiful. How could anyone in all the lands even consider them otherwise? The one of legends was much too serious. She wasn't at all like her sisters. The fairy godmother was proud of her wings, sang beautiful songs, and taught the best class of all, wish-granting. None of the fairies could wait until they were old enough for wish-granting class. As far as Merryweather was concerned, that was the highest honor for fairy students. The fairies knew in their hearts that Maleficent would never make it that far. Not that she had much of a chance with Merryweather, Fauna, and Flora being up for wish-granting status in the same year as her. The fairy godmother herself said she felt there was a very good chance Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather would be awarded status. And since wish-granting status was bestowed on only 3 students in any graduating class, it seemed silly for Maleficent, or any other student for that matter, to pursue it as her fairy calling. Besides, there were many other important things a fairy could do upon graduating from the academy. Giving Merryweather and her friends a nasty look, Nanny walked out the door. Once she left, the class erupted in a storm of protests. What does she see in Maleficent? Merryweather yelled. She can't even fly, one fairy screamed. You're not even a fairy. You don't belong here. Go back to Hades, said another. Maleficent sat rigid and afraid. She didn't understand why all the fairies hated her so much. Was it really her horns? Or was there something terribly wrong with her? Was she evil? She didn't feel evil. She felt like everyone else. At least, she thought she did. Come to think of it, she really didn't know how everyone else felt. Maybe she was evil. My parents must have known I was evil. That's why they left me in the crow tree. They wanted me to die. As the taunting continued, Maleficent was aware of something swelling up inside her. A horrible burning sensation she didn't like. She felt like she was slowly catching fire from the inside, as if a flame was struggling to get out of her. Before she knew it, her entire body was engulfed in a stifling green blaze. Maleficent heard the other students screaming, but before she could process what was happening, she found herself alone in her treehouse, confused as to how she had gotten there. She shook uncontrollably with rage and fear, crying harder than she had ever had before. The shrieks of the other fairies were still echoing in her ears when Annie appeared with a worried look on her face. I didn't mean it, Maleficent stammered. You didn't mean what, dear? Nanny asked. To hurt them, Maleficent cried. You didn't hurt them, Nanny said reassuringly. You completed a magnificent travel charm. It's a difficult spell that's way beyond your grade level. I'm very impressed. But they were screaming. Oh yes, well, that's young fairies for you. Dramatic and high-strung. You're a smart girl, Maleficent. I'm sure you know this already. Nanny paused for a moment and then continued. I couldn't be more pleased at how different you are from those fools, Maleficent. I truly couldn't. Had you been an ordinary fairy living in that hollowed-out tree, I think I would have probably passed you by. If I was an ordinary fairy, I wouldn't have been left in the tree. Nanny nodded vigorously. Too right. That's one of the main reasons I don't care for my own ilk. And why I don't display my wings. Fairies can be a hateful bunch. Maleficent smiled, her tears subsiding, as she listened to Nanny. She wanted to hug her. She wanted to tell her she loved her for everything she was saying, but she didn't want to interrupt her. Oh, they don't realize how hateful they are. They think they're full of magic and light and all things good, like sugar and honey, comes out of their... Well, you get my point. Maleficent laughed. Well, isn't that a rare sight? In the years we've been together, I don't think I've ever seen you laugh. Nanny paused for a moment, deep in thought. It all makes sense now. What? What makes sense? You're 7. 7? What's so special about being 7? 7 is a very special age for fairies, especially for fairies who aren't like the others. Fairies like you and me, who are more like witches than fairies. Fairies who aren't content with fairy magic and fairy life and understand there are other wonderful forms of magic in this world. 7 is just the start of your adventure, and I think we need to celebrate. Now, tell me all about your travel charm. I want to hear about how you learned it. You're a fascination to me, Maleficent. You're further in your schooling than anyone in your class, and if that stack of books of mine you've hidden away in any indication of the style of magic you intend to employ, we have a lot of work to do. I think you're up to the task. I really do. You know what? I think it might be time to take you out of that school. I can't have your spirit and potential squelched by those dimwits. Let them fumble with their silly fairy magic. Let them spend their days complimenting each other's wings. You have real magic to learn. Important magic. Important magic. Those words echoed in Maleficent's ears and filled her with confidence. That was how it was with Nanny. A flurry of encouraging words and love thrown at Maleficent from every direction. Nanny never missed an opportunity to heap love upon the girl. And if Maleficent sometimes felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of Nanny's affection, or occasionally grew stiff at Nanny's touch, it was because she didn't like the attention. Maleficent loved Nanny more deeply than she expected she might. She just wasn't used to being loved. Well, I'm going to bake you a marvelous cake for dessert, Nanny said, clapping her hands excitedly. I want to hear all about this travel charm and how you managed it. I really am impressed. Maleficent knew that Nanny was being sincere. She never said anything she didn't mean like the other fairies. It was hard to tell Nanny was a fairy at all. Maleficent wondered if Nanny had also had a hard time growing up in the fairylands, being so unfairy-like and having as a sister the famous fairy godmother. No, dear, that part wasn't hard at all, Nanny said, reading her thoughts. They don't call me the one of legends for nothing. That was one of the best nights of Maleficent's childhood. Spent eating cake with Nanny and telling her about the travel charm, describing the warm sensation and seeing the awe reflected in Nanny's eyes when she explained it in every detail, just as Nanny had wanted. You did exactly the right thing, my dear. If someone is treating you poorly, or you feel yourself becoming angry and you start to feel that warm sensation, you use that charm. Go straight to your treehouse or straight to me and your crows. You just think of us. You will find yourself with us before you know it. Promise me, dear. You will do what Nanny tells you. Of course, Nanny. Maleficent wished she had Nanny's power to read minds. She often wondered what Nanny was thinking. Was that concern in her eyes? Had something about Maleficent's story upset her? No, my dear. What you see is pride. I couldn't be more prouder of you. You've made me very happy today, my darling. Very happy indeed. Chapter 8. The Bird in the Attic. Snow White sat alone in the attic among her mother's old belongings, remembering how things were long ago, in the time before her stepmother died and became the mother Snow White had always wanted her to be. Snow understood why her mother didn't want to go up there. Those possessions reminded the old queen of the period when she had sequestered herself years earlier. the time when she had gone mad with grief and plotted to kill her own stepdaughter. Snow tried to compartmentalize her mother into 3 different women. The mother she had now, the mother who had loved her when she was very young, and the mother who tried to kill her. Snow White knew it wasn't her mother's fault. The queen had been tormented by her own father, heartbroken by the loss of her husband, and bewitched by the witch triplets. Snow had made the various versions of her mother over the years into imaginary dolls. Dolls she kept locked away in a trunk in this room. Dolls she never wanted to play with or see. Dolls imbued with pain and covered in dust. Snow, like the mother she had now, she had no reason to revisit the others. Even the recollection of her sweet mother from early childhood brought Snow heartache, because she knew all those terrible days that followed her father's death would come tumbling down like an avalanche, reminding her of how grief had destroyed that mother. Yes, she liked to focus on the woman she loved dearly and depended on now, but she couldn't look at her mother's things without bringing those dolls into the light, taking them into her hands, and dusting them off as she replayed the timeline of her life. Those dolls, those mothers, marked the passing of beautiful yet terrifying times. With quiet, tentative steps, Snow White went to the wooden chest that contained the artifacts of her tortured childhood. It creaked painfully as she opened it, like a warning. The book of fairy tales she was looking for was sitting beneath a small wooden box with a carving of a dagger piercing a heart. Something about the box sent chills into Snow's own heart. She didn't want to know what was in it. She didn't want to see the pain on her mother's face if she were to ask her about the box, so it would have to remain a mystery. It was enough that she was up there alone, knowing her mother was waiting for her, knowing each moment that passed was a pain in her mother's heart. Snow suddenly felt like she had when she was very small. In the old castle where she had grown up, there had been a hallway that had always frightened her. There was no particular reason for her fear, aside from the fact that the hallway was always rather dark. Snow's imagination had conjured up all sorts of nightmares living in the shadows, but she used to have to walk down that hallway every day to reach the classroom where she'd meet her tutor. Some days she was so afraid that she would run, even though she knew her governess, Verona, would scold her for her unladylike behavior. Snow hadn't cared. She had felt compelled to run for safety even in the bright light of day. Snow White felt like that now. She tried not to look at what else was in the chest. She tried to suppress the pain surging through her heart. Snow removed the book as quickly as she could, trying not to disturb the other contents, and then she slammed the chest closed, causing dust to cascade into the air, where it glittered in the sunlight screaming through the little attic window. She looked at it for a moment, dazzled by the brilliance of something seemingly mundane. Snow mused about how something usually so ugly could turn into something quite beautiful. And she remembered her mother's transformation, her mother's beauty, and suddenly she wasn't frightened. Chapter 9. Her Important Magic. As the years passed, Nanny could tell the coldness inside Maleficent was thawing. Maleficent wasn't sure if it was from Nanny's love or the thing inside her that had been growing from some time, the terrible burning feeling that sometimes she felt when she was angry or sad. She tried to banish it from her mind and focus on her magic, her important magic, which she studied at every opportunity. On Nanny's bookshelf, she had found several tomes written by the Odd Sisters, 3 witches named Lucinda, Ruby, and Martha. Their pages were filled with all sorts of dark magic that intrigued Maleficent. One of the spells was particularly interesting to her. It called for a smattering of herbs along with hair from the witch's own head and instructions to be written in ink on a tiny slip of parchment. These ingredients had to be fed to a very large bullfrog, which the witch would command to find her victim. The bullfrog would then crawl into a sleeping person's mouth and live in their throat, waiting on orders from the witch by means of telepathy. Maleficent had to look up what telepathy meant. When she did, she finally had a word for something that she had observed in Nanny: the ability to read minds and communicate without speaking. From what Maleficent read in the book, she gathered that the gruesome spell was terrifying for the victim. The witch could command the person to do whatever she liked. The bullfrog would come out only at night, while the host slept, to report his findings to the witch, and then it would squeeze itself back into the victim's mouth before morning. The victim was aware of something living in their throat, but wasn't able to say anything about it. The book also had a variation of the spell in which the witch would take something personal from the victim she wished to command, instead of using a frog. It could be anything, really. A teacup, a hairbrush, or a ring. It seems some witches collected such items should there ever be an occasion in which they needed them. Maleficent didn't want to do such dark spells. They seemed rather ghastly and repulsive to her, actually. She just liked reading and learning about them. Maleficent also loved reading the lyrical and often hilarious notations in the Odd Sisters books. They were quickly becoming her favorite spellcasters and her favorite witches. Maleficent liked knowing things. It gave her power, gave her confidence. The more she read and learned, the less afraid she was of the other fairies. She had a deep sense of pride that while the other fairies were learning how to enchant broomsticks, she was learning valuable charms and spells she could use when she finally ventured out of the fairylands. Maleficent was learning real magic. That was the most exciting of all. Chapter 10. The Odd Sisters Book. Snow White sat on a lovely red velvet chair that she had brought very close to an ornate gold frame mirror. She held the book of fairy tales her mother had once read to her on her lap, flipping through the pages so her mother could see. "All of our stories are in there," Grimald said. Snow turned to the last page of the Dragon Witch's story, looking at it in horror. "Will this happen to your friend Maleficent?" "I don't know, my dear, but I need to warn her." Grimald's reflection flickered as it sometimes did when she was worried. "I hadn't been able to reach her in any of the mirrors. You must send word to Morningstar Castle. I think she will arrive there shortly." "I don't understand why you're friends with her after what she's done to Aurora," Snow White said, shaking her head. "She has her reasons, my dear," Grimald replied. "Reasons that are not mine to share with you or anyone else. I have been her friend and confidant for many years, Snow. I can't turn my back on her now just because we don't agree with her choices. Perhaps I will be able to talk her out of hurting the girl and save her from sharing my fate." Snow considered that for a moment. "But I don't understand. This book was written long before Maleficent ever considered putting the princess to sleep. How is that everything that has been written in it has come to pass?" Snow turned to another page. "And look, here's a section about you and me. It details everything, even you coming into the mirror and being my protector. How is that possible?" Grimald looked concerned. "I don't know. Our story wasn't there the last time I read the book to you. The book may be writing itself like a history, or perhaps the sisters were able to see into the future and wrote down their prophecies. What if it's a spell? What if the book's enchanted and anything that's written within its pages come true?" Snow asked. "Spellbound?" the old queen gasped. The thought sent chills through Snow. "If that is true, then no one will be able to protect those sisters from my vengeance. I've long accepted that I chose my own path down the road of regret. But if it was all designed by those sisters, if it was written by them, and I was simply their puppet, then there will be Hades to pay." "Mother, no," Snow pleaded. I will write to Morningstar to warn them about the book. Now please promise me you won't hurt anyone." "I can't do that, my darling. I'm sorry. If they are the reason I tried to kill you, then no power will be great enough to save the Odd Sisters from my wrath." Thank you so much for listening to chapters 6 through 10. The deeper we get into this story, the more I realize my theory that all Disney-related fairy tales intertwine somehow at some point. I mean, the fairy godmother, I was not even expecting her to even know Nanny or Maleficent for that matter. Please give this video a thumbs up. It lets me know that I'm doing a good job and it makes my day. If you're enjoying the story so far, don't miss the next set of chapters by hitting that subscribe button and turning on post notifications so you know the very moment I post my next video. Hope you guys are having an awesome March so far, and I'll see your wonderful faces next week. Bye!